Hi, kitty cats. Is President Trump the law of the land and what he says goes? No. The Constitution explicitly lays out the powers of the president, and Trump only misrepresents what he wishes were true. So, let's look at the structure of the United States government to uncover what the president can really do. Before I get started, I'll do a little quick introduction. I am Amethyst Herrick. I am an author and a podcaster. You can check the links below that are spinning around here for more information about me and the work that I do. My personal website is amethyst.io. I think it's about to come up right there. You will find all the social media networks that I'm on. You can please follow me for updates on everything I do. My professional website, which is coming up, is gender-identitytoday.com. All of my articles and my podcasts are published there, as well as work from other contributors. So if you like this particular content, I hope you'll consider subscribing at gender-identitytoday.com. You can get a subscription for as low as $2 a month. And if you'd like to contribute content to gender-identitytoday.com, you can contact me through my personal website, and you can just there's a contact page. You can email me. If you would like to leave a tip, that's coming up here. There's a link to coffee.com where you can send a tip as you see fit. All right, let's see. Let me address a couple of comments already. Miss Chief, hi, good to see you. Ned 3000, I think it was. Hi, good to see you. Grief Foundation even here. I have a user who has said never listen to an adult with purple hair. All right. Presumably then you're going to end up just leaving, so it does make a difference. Oh, hey, Bobby. There's Bobby Pamela, too. All right. I want to talk about a comment that I got. I made a transgender joy video last Friday, and this was about Trump's executive orders that are being challenged in U.S. district courts, as well as, by people of the United States. I ended each segment with looking at the camera and saying, "Sorry, Donald." And I did that because I like a bit of comedy, right? I like to have a moment to indulge the actress within, and I thought it was funny. Well, that bit didn't land very well with some people. So this comment, which I'll bring up, described those events that I talked about, as well as my own video, described those events as sedition. Sedition is defying the law of the land, rebellion. I know that Trump has called himself the most powerful man in the U.S. government, and he seems to believe it. And worse, his supporters, some of whom may actually be in my TikTok feed here, some of his supporters seem to believe that too. So many people actually believe the president has the power to affect pretty much every aspect of U.S. operation, including, no crap, I've seen this, people blaming the president for natural disasters. I get it, but, there are certain things the president can and cannot do. So what I'm going to do today here, I want to talk about, I want to show you the comments. I'm going to read it. And actually, let me do that now. Actually, let me really quickly say hi, because there's Sirsha. Hi, Sirsha. Here's somebody who says, if I'm confused about my gender or what I need is mental health treatment. Thank you. I've had plenty across my life. I appreciate you being so concerned about me, Poppy. It's really kind of you. All right. Here's the comment. Let's hope this works. Oops, there it goes. It doesn't look great on TikTok. All right. To allow you a moment to fully understand, when the president says something and makes it a law of the land, smaller lands therein don't get the right to say no. That does not apply here, where it applies everywhere else. What you're talking about is a type of sedition and a type of nonviolent insubordination. This is all a type of misinformation and misguided toward the people. You can absolutely say no, and that's correct, but you can also be arrested, fined, and others, to just mark a few for not following the law. Should we cover the many judges who said no and are now behind bars or barred from practice? Because local judges can say all kinds of things, but don't get to overstep whole other branches, again, checks and balances. We need to stop pushing gender ideologies because the rest of the world sincerely disagrees with the less than 1% who believe this. Just because you're loud and annoying does not make you correct. It just means you're loud and annoying, and the rest of the world really regrets your kindergarten education. Please, take a few seconds, see that there is no hate or spite here, simple truths that can act as your dose of reality. All right, let me get back to my TikTok. Here we go. Okay, cool. All right. So that was the comment. All right, that's the comment. You can see it. I took a screenshot of it. I took a screenshot of it because I didn't want to make it appear I've changed anything that this person said. The comment still exists on my YouTube. Comes from somebody named Hilarious Truths. Live it up. All right. What I want to do here, I want to explain why Trump is actually the one misleading the U.S. regarding his power. I want to talk about how Trump has overstepped his bounds as president and how the events I described are supported entirely by the United States Constitution and are not sedition. All right, Angie MBW on TikTok sent me some gifts. Thank you so much, Angie. I wonder if I can make you a moderator. Doesn't seem like it. Ponyboy asks, how many cats do I own? I only own one. And yes, I do refer to her as her. And I do that because at the moment she has not indicated to me that I should refer to her as them or him. But if she did, you goddamn better believe I'm going to respect what it is she had to say, which is what I assume you're not going to end up doing to me, Ponyboy. So let me just say this. Stay gold, Ponyboy. Stay gold. Do you still remember the poem, Ponyboy? Nature's first green is gold. Her heart is hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. So grief subsides to grief. So leaf subsides to leaf. So Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down to day. Only gold can stay, Ponyboy. Remember that. All right. Miss Chief says, come on, you can't be a Trumpy fan and criticize other people's hair. I have no further commentary. Brenda, hi Brenda, says, always be closing. Brenda also says, I think this guy is an 80s used car salesman. He follows the ABCs of selling. That's funny. All right, let's see. Let's talk about a tripartite government. The United States Constitution. Ooh, I want to bring this up. I have been a university professor, all right? But I have not been a professor of law. I have been a professor of chemistry. And it is possible that there are subtleties that I am going to miss here. If I do miss, then, I would appreciate it if somebody corrected me. But I'm going to talk at a high enough level. I don't think I'm going to have any difficulty with this, but here we go. The United States government is called tripartite. The Constitution differed from other documents of its time. The Constitution, what it does is it doesn't grant the government power. The Constitution limits the power of the government. Usually that's not what you see. Usually you saw the opposite, that it granted the powers the government had, not limited. The power of the government, as our founding fathers said it explicitly, is granted by the people of the country, the citizens. The government itself has no power, if not granted by the people. Why would the founding fathers do this? They were used to a monarchy, and the monarch held complete power. They didn't want to return to that. Period. Now you can look at the UK, obviously, and we've got Miss Chief and Grief Foundation here who can say, the monarchy doesn't have a ton of power. Anyway, moving forward. Tripartite implies composed of three major branches. In the United States, those are the legislative branch, the judicial branch, and the executive branch. It's broken up like that so that each branch can limit all the other branches. Well, can limit other branches. And they call these checks and balances. And this gets thrown about. In fact, it got thrown about in that comment there. Checks and balances. So let's talk briefly. The legislative branch. The legislative branch has the power to draft laws. Notice I said draft laws. The legislative branch is limited by the judicial branch, which can overturn the laws they draft if they are unconstitutional. The legislative branch is augmented by the executive branch, which enacts the law. It makes the drafts that the legislative branch create official, and then it enforces those laws. If we move on to the judicial branch, the power of the judicial branch is to interpret the law and overturn them. Anything that comes from the legislative branch, it can overturn them. They have the power also to rule against actions of the executive branch. The judicial branch is limited by the executive branch, who nominates or appoints the judges who will end up in the judicial branch. It is also limited by the legislative branch, who has to approve the president's nominations, at least for the Supreme Court of the United States. There's also, finally, the executive branch, and the executive branch only has the power to enact laws. It makes them official. It has to work with the legislative branch on these laws. The executive branch also has the power to veto laws. True. That gets sent to the executive branch, but the legislative branch, with enough votes, can actually override a veto as well. So the two have to work together. The executive branch also owns the power to enforce the laws of the land. Cannot make them. Has to enforce them. The executive branch is limited by the judicial branch, which can overrule actions by the executive branch, and also limited by the legislative branch, which has the power to impeach the president for incompetence or for failing to fulfill the duty as defined by the Constitution. So this quick summary here: the legislative branch makes laws but can't enact or interpret them. The judicial branch interprets laws but can't draft or enforce them. The executive branch enforces laws but cannot draft or interpret them. All of this is on purpose. They did this to prevent any branch from acquiring or using too much power. That was the point. That was the point of why the Constitution was written the way it was. Is it perfect? No. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is this is how our government has been defined. All right, let me see what we got here on... I do have a couple of comments here on TikTok. Angie, thank you so much for sharing. Do appreciate it. J-Dub, thanks so much for sharded. Oh, that's very different. Sorry to hear that, J-Dub. Hopefully you're hitting the can. Notification. That's the username. I just came so hard to this stream. I'm going to tell you, part of me wants to be complimented by that. Really do. Marku says, I am talking to 4 people. Well, I don't know. I'm looking at 6 right now in TikTok and 11 on YouTube. There's 7 on TikTok. So I don't know. Marku. There you go. M says, I look like I have great vibes. Thanks so much. I think I do. Let's see. Oh, Angie says to Marku, thanks for the engagement. Absolutely. Definitely. Latinos for Trump has now misgendered me. I hope that makes you feel powerful. Latinos for Trump. All right. Ned 7000. Sorry, Ned 7000. Okay. Ned 7000 writes, it was written in such a way, the U.S. Constitution was written in such a way that Gannon should never get his hands on the full Triforce. Quite right. All right, let's talk about the difference between state government and federal government. States, according to the United States government, hold more authority over their constituency than the federal government. State governments are closer. They know the problems better than the federal government ever could, and they should have more ability to do so. The Constitution does nothing explicitly to limit state governments except to stipulate that they are republics. That is, that they are elected governments. Most states are modeled directly after the federal government, which was tripartite. I just talked about it. The federal government, in this relationship, is responsible for making laws at a very high level. They're responsible for maintaining the United States Constitution and, of course, the federal budget. They're responsible for carrying out foreign policy, so, interaction with other countries, including acts of war. The federal government can only limit states if the states go against the United States Constitution. So let me give you an example. I have 2 good examples. One of them is actually Roe versus Wade. There was never a law that restricted the right to abortion at the federal level. It was not a law. Roe versus Wade was a Supreme Court decision that would act as a precedent a precedent, I'm not even listening to myself, act as precedent if a state wrote laws that limited abortion rights. Before that, the states made their own decisions. And now that the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, states are again making their own decisions. The federal government could only have limited states if there were a law forbidding what the state tries to do, or if interpretation of a court case provides precedent against the law in the state. Here's my second example. I held up one finger. Here's my second example. There are no laws forbidding gender-affirming care at the federal level. There are 4 executive orders that come from the executive branch, which does not draft laws, right? There you go. There are no laws forbidding gender-affirming care at the federal level. There are laws at the state level, in particular Tennessee, which drafted a law in 2023 that went to the Supreme Court at the end of 2024. Yes, December in 2024. The United States versus Scrimetti. And it's right now at the Supreme Court for a ruling. The case was to say that the law discriminates only against transgender youth when it comes to gender-affirming care. It does not discriminate against cisgender youth when it comes to gender-affirming care. So, if the Supreme Court overturns this Tennessee law, it sets a precedent, which would forbid more states to make laws, similar to how Roe versus Wade worked. If the Supreme Court rules that the Tennessee law does not violate the Constitution in terms of discrimination, 14th Amendment, there are a lot actually that go into this, it sets the precedent for more laws of the type. It doesn't outlaw other states from making their own decisions, but that is not a law of the federal government. Okay? The federal government, in the end, does not rule over the states, and I want to return to what I said at the very beginning. Power of the government is given by the people, not the Constitution. Power of the federal government is granted by the states within the Union. Power of the states is granted by the people in those states. So on that, I know I've talked and talked and talked. Let me go back to the comments. Go back to the comment. Let me grab a few of these here. Look like I have great vibes. I already said that. A purple hair. Who listens to these people? Apparently some. Anyway. M says, what does hair color have to do with anything ever? To what a great point. I mean, I did mention I was a university professor. I didn't have purple hair at the time, but I do know university professors with purple hair, so there you go. Angie, I think this is a great Sailor Moon shirt. It's got all 5 of the Sailor Guardians, the original Sailor Guardians. Totally love it. Protect the Dolls, thank you for following. Nice. All right. Oh yeah, I was going to go back to the document. Oh, sorry, let's bring this up here. I got to change. All right, here we go. To allow you a moment to fully understand, when the president says something and makes it a law of the land, the president doesn't say anything that becomes a law of the land. Once again, that falls to the legislative branch. It is not a function of the executive branch. That's how it goes. So right there, the president doesn't say anything that becomes law of the land. It's not his function. And then goes on to say smaller lands therein don't get the right to say no, that does not apply here, where it applies everywhere else. Depends. If there is a law at the federal level, if there is legal precedent at the legal level, you're correct. If there is not, and in this case with the gender-affirming care in the executive orders, that's untrue. The states absolutely have the right to say no, that it does not apply here. I mean, we're already seeing this. We saw this before those executive orders. So anyway, wrong. What you're talking about is a type of sedition. Ooh, type of sedition. Let's talk about sedition. I'm going to go back to my talking head. Sedition is rebellion against a government or against a constitution. The way it's usually defined is subversion of laws and insurrection against a government. If you look at the Constitution, in particular the First Amendment specifically protects what might be called rebellion. It says Congress cannot draft any laws abridging the rights to free speech or freedom of the press, and goes on to say that every citizen has the right to assemble peaceably and demand the government listen to their grievances. Just to remind you, the power of the government is derived from approval of the people. That's why we elect these people. So what happens when people rebel against laws? Well, the judicial branch snaps into action and interprets the laws in order to redress the grievances caused by peaceably assembling as protected by the First Amendment. The judicial branch is the one that will determine if the laws or executive orders are unconstitutional. Not the executive branch, not the legislative branch, the judicial branch. This is exactly what I talked about. I talked about 3 instances, well, 2 in particular, that were U.S. district judges, federal judges, that declared those executive orders by the executive branch unconstitutional. And that was just this week. I've had probably 4 or 5 Transgender Joy videos that talk about all the federal judges. I can think it was Thomas Zilli was the one that I talked about this past Friday. Julia E. Kobik. Ana Reyes was another. There are many who are looking at these executive orders and striking them down, or at least actually making partial preliminary injunctions against these executive orders, because that's what they do. The judicial branch is stating explicitly that the executive branch has overstepped its authority. The executive orders are not in line with the law of the land, which is the Constitution. And this is important, because the executive branch does not make laws of the land, and the legislative branch does not interpret the laws of the land. So let's return to this particular comment. When we return to this, here we go, oops, pull up this. What you're talking about is a type of sedition and a type of nonviolent insubordination. Well, nonviolent insubordination is correct. That's what's called assembling peaceably for the redress of grievances. First Amendment there, bro. Whoever you are. This is all a type of misinformation and misguided towards the people. Wrong. No, this is our Constitution. I was a chemist. I can go and look on Wikipedia, read the Constitution, whatever. This is not anything that is, it should be a surprise to people in the United States. You can absolutely say no, and that's correct, but you can also be arrested, fined, and others, to just mark a few for not following the law. Accurate. If there were a law. And there aren't. It's an executive order that is being interpreted as overstepping the bound of the executive branch. Done. Should we cover the many judges who just said no and are now behind bars? I'm going to tell you, I know that there was one judge in Wisconsin who was arrested. I don't know all of the situation around that, so I'm not going to discuss it because I can't discuss it intelligently right now. I know of no other judges. And I want to say, this says because local judges can say all kinds of things but don't get to overstep whole other branches. Again, checks and balances. These are U.S. district judges. These are judges who are appointed by the president specifically to limit his powers. All right? They are literally doing what the Constitution says they're supposed to. They are fulfilling the function of the branch they're part of. Brandon now says, in regard to that comment, I am actually impressed that someone can be so wrong so many times in such a short space. Yeah. All right. Angie now says, anyone that voted for Trump doesn't care about an insurrection. Half of them were involved in it. I'm going to return to that, but I want to finish something else. Digital Keith says the federal government can only withhold federal funds if they ignore executive orders. No, there actually isn't. Is there a law that guarantees states federal funds? No, I don't believe so. Again, this may be a subtlety that I don't know, Digital Keith. My understanding is that the president cannot hold states ransom by saying, you don't do the things I want you to do, so as a result, I'm not going to give you any money. My understanding is that is overstepping the powers of the executive branch, because the executive branch does not have the authority to write those laws. And so if states are not doing what the president wants, too bad. So Angie says Trump did it with FEMA. Okay. I mean, Meaning what? That Trump withhold federal funds? Probably. He's already threatened to do it with transgender athletes, colleges that teach, presume, gender ideology, and also any medical institution that gets federal funding that provides gender affirming care. So Trump's doing it. Is he allowed to? I don't believe the answer is yes, because there is no legal precedent nor law that would support him being able to do that. And if there is actually a website, I wish I could remember, it's called Court Watch, I believe it is. And there is a phenomenal page. The person who runs Court Watch must just never sleep. But there are over 200 at this point. 200. Think about that. There's a 2 and 2 other zeros on that. More than 200 lawsuits, lawsuits that have been filed against the Trump administration since he took office. It's been 100 days, people. That's 2 lawsuits a day this guy has been able to pick up. Like, that's pretty impressive. Louise Richardson is here, says hello. Hi, Louise. All right, let me go back to this here. This is great. Support for gender-affirming care. I want to bring this up because this comment here now says we need to stop pushing gender ideologies. And I'm going to get back to it. Let me read to this. Here's that one. Here we go. Support for gender-affirming care. Who supports gender-affirming care here? Well, it turns out a couple of relatively major medical associations. I'm talking about the American Medical Association. I'm talking about the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Psychological Association, and of course the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, of which I am a member. All of these organizations have found gender-affirming care, have done plenty of study, and find that gender-affirming care drastically improves the lives of gender-expansive people. Who else supports gender-affirming care? Well, I went and looked at the most recent polls I could find, and it turns out, in the most recent poll that I could find, 2 out of 3 Americans support the right to gender-affirming care. 2 out of 3. That's adult gender-affirming care and youth gender-affirming care. 2 out of 3 Americans believe the government should not make laws about gender identity. 2 out of 3. 9 out of 10 parents of gender-expansive children support them. Who disagrees with gender? So, the vast majority, not vast majority, but the majority of people support gender-affirming care and support not limiting it. How much? If you go, well, 2 out of 3, whoopty shit. 2 out of 3 is actually enough for a constitutional amendment. And since the power of the government is actually derived from the approval of the people, you never know. We'll probably end up electing people who end up making it a constitutional amendment to protect the right to free expression of gender identity. Who disagrees with gender-affirming care? I guess the religious right. And the politicians who court the religious right. People who are morally righteous and cannot stand others not being like they are. Let me go back to this document, this comment. We need to stop pushing gender ideologies because the rest of the world sincerely disagrees with the less than 1% who believe this. False. 2 out of 3. That is not the rest of the world. That is not sincere disagreement. That is actual support. I'm not making this shit up. I went to go find polls, and you can go and find them yourselves. Just because you're loud and annoying does not make you correct. No, accurate. That is true. Just if I'm loud and annoying. It just means I'm loud and annoying. The rest of the world really regrets your kindergarten education. Please take a few seconds. See that there is no hate or spite here. Yeah, there's no hate or spite. The reason why we're having this conversation, the religious right is loud and annoying. This is 1/3 of the people. Or less. I don't know who all is the religious right. Less than 2/3 of the population disagrees here. But they are very vocal. They are very loud. They are very annoying. Please take a few seconds. See that there is no hate or spite here. Simple truths that can act as your dose of reality. No hate or spite. You called me loud and annoying with a kindergarten education. And I hope, as a result of this presentation here, I've dispelled those rumors as well. Well, that was all I had to say today. Let me go and look at some of these some of these comments here. Going back to YouTube here, it says Louise says the courts in some states are our only hopes. Absolutely, the court is really our only hope. We need courts to limit Trump's actions. I might also act. Oh, actually, Angie brought this up: sedition, insurrection. When I brought up insurrection, do you remember what I said here? Subversion of the laws, insurrection against a government. I don't know if anybody remembers January 6th, 2021. I don't know if anybody is seeing subversion of the powers of the executive branch here. This is rebellion against our Constitution, and judges are starting to call it rebellion against the whole government. If we're going to talk about sedition, let's actually talk about Trump. Let's talk about the Trump administration. Federal judges, U.S. district judges doing what they do for a living is not sedition. People who have said, well, district judges are calling this unconstitutional, therefore we're not preemptively going to comply with these executive orders, which were never laws of the lands anyway, that is not sedition. That is what our government does. That is what the United States does. So, not sedition. What do we got here? Digital Keith says, oh no, hang on. We already talked about that. Digital Keith now says there is no guarantee that any state or institution must be given federal funds under law. Sure. Your point? I mean, there's probably also no guarantee that states need to hand off the taxes then to the federal government. This would be my guess. Lady Ivanberg says, why the blue hair? Well, first of all, it's purple. Are you trying to tank the movement? Not really sure what that means. I didn't know I was tanking any movement. I didn't know I was part of a movement. What I'm doing at this point is talking about the Constitution. And I think that's about it. Digital Keith says, I think your math is skewed and not nuanced enough. Well, all right. I mean, I have at least the link to one of these polls that I found. So at least one of these links, I'll pull the rest out of history if you want me to, Digital Keith. I mean, I can quote something right here. Majorities of transgender adults and cisgender adults support trans children and teenagers having access to gender-affirming counseling. 8 in 10 trans adults, 79%, and 6 in 10 cisgender adults, 62%, support trans children between the ages of 10 and 14 having access to gender-affirming counseling, similar to the share of trans adults and cisgender adults, 79% and 66% respectively, who say the same about trans teenagers ages 15 through 13. I'm quoting from a KFF poll here. In the report section, the Washington Post, trans survey views of trans people and issues. You can say my math is skewed. I'm pulling these from somebody else, man. I don't know what else to tell you. I recognize you don't want to agree with me, and that's fine. Like, don't agree with me. Live it up. But this is a poll. Like, don't pretend that like polls are just false because they don't support your viewpoint. Source of the polls, audience size with demographic cross-section of that particular Washington Post one, I believe it was 2,000 people. Survey size of, N equals 2,000. Washington Post, I don't know what the demographic cross-section was. At the very least, looks like transgender adults and cisgender adults, some of whom actually had transgender children, were transgender. There you go. I mean, if you want, man, send me a DM and I'll send you this link. I don't mind. I'm not here trying to make stuff up. I'm here to dispel rumors. And if you need more rumors dispelled, hey, I'm here. That's why I'm here. All right. From YouTube, I got Bo Hull saying, what should you expect from a weak, feeble cluster of cells like Donald Trump? Listen, I don't want to be that pissy about him, all right? Because he was elected. And that's the way our Constitution works as well. Donald Trump was elected. Now, some little tidbits here. 36% of the 36% of registered voters didn't vote at all, or didn't vote for president, at the very least. That leaves what? 66%? 66% of people who voted for president. About 2% went to third parties. So now we're down to 62%, which means no more than, I think my math was wrong, 64%? Sorry, I'm not even listening to myself. Which means actually that neither Kamala Harris nor Donald Trump could actually get more votes than the people who cared little enough for both of them to not to vote at all. Neither of them could actually get a majority. You understand? Well, I suppose they could have gotten a majority, but neither of them did, for what it's worth. Donald Trump got less than a third of the votes of the eligible voters in the United States, period. That is not a mandate. It's not anything. Now I've got Mick here who's telling me no one cares. Mick shit. With a poomoji. Look at you. No one cares. Blah, 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 yap, yap, yap. And yet, Mick with a poomoji. It doesn't exactly inspire confidence. Siren sent me a little gift. Thank you so much, Siren. Good to see you here. So glad. Let's see. Louise says politicians should not block the expertise of medical professionals. Agreed. And it turns out actually the citizenry agrees and the medical professionals also agree. Shouldn't those be the people that we care about? Those medical professionals? Okay, Anita Lichtenberg makes what I think is a phenomenal point. They never realize that they are pushing a gender ideology themselves. The one that says that there are only two genders and they align with sex. I think we have the better one. Well, I'm going to go with you on that. Yes, an ideology, I don't have the definition in front of me. An ideology is a system of beliefs. Okay, beliefs is what I said. They don't have to be true. It was a system of beliefs. I started off, at least my undergraduate education as a biologist, and particularly in genetics, so molecular biology. Molecular biology. These are words, sex and gender, owned by biology. Not by Trump. If anything, if he appeals to science, but then misuses terms defined by science, that's his belief. That is an ideology. That is not a science, no matter how many executive orders you want to write, saying that science needs to fall in line with Trump. That is not nonviolent insubordination. That is actually perversion, subversion of science at this point now, laws of science. So thank you, Anita. Very, very phenomenal points. Grief Foundation says those are very vague statements, though I think you're talking about the points that I made initially. I would wager the majority do not support pediatric GAC. Majority will support adult GAC. And Grief Foundation, I hope when I read that directly, because for what it's worth, just want to tell you, my friend, when I was writing the notes for this particular live stream, I grabbed that quote in case you said, yeah, but, you're probably wrong. No, it turns out that 79% and 62% will even support it between the ages of 10 and 14. It goes up for the ages 15 through 17, and then at that point, you don't even have to worry about it. At least 2/3 of trans adults, hang on, let me see, 3/4. Okay, so it does say here, less than half of cisgender adults support trans children or teenagers having access to puberty blockers, which is different from gender-affirming care, right? Because gender-affirming care can be clothes. It can be somebody asking, can you use different pronouns? Can you call me by a different name? Gender-affirming care is not limited to medical. In fact, I would actually say the bulk of gender-affirming care is actually social. There you go. So I think we both have a point here. Grief Foundation, for the most part, you are looking at people who support puberty blocking medications for trans teenagers, almost 70%. So that's ages 15 to 17 have access to hormonal treatments, but 10 to 14, less than half, it says, support them getting puberty blockers. Now, 10 to 4 to 10, right? That's pretty early. So, all right, what else do we have here? Margie Fancy Pants is here. Hello, better than late than never. Nope. Yep. And then Margie says, Amethyst, it doesn't make things up. Mostly true. All right. Brenda also brings up, but remember, Brenda says, remember that Hitler was elected chancellor with 28% of the popular vote. Okay. I mean, it's a good point. And I don't want to, that's a good point. Trump is now in power. And I guess my point was to say that he was indeed elected according to a vote. Do I agree with it? No, I voted against him because I would. But I voted against him because he ran on a platform intending to limit me and my community. So it's a great point. I mean, yes, Hitler rose to power with less support. I just wanted to bring up, we're looking at about the same, level of support for Trump. There's all told it was something like 33%, 32 point some odd percent of the popular vote, which ain't much. So what else do we have here? Seculoid. Seculoid. I love that name. I haven't even read what this person said. Seculoid. Digital, says us, is responding to Digital Keith to say, you don't need any of that shit. If you do any honest research, you know GAC works. So, Seculoid, thank you. Actually, maybe I shouldn't have said how much I liked your name before I read your comment. But I have said many times in my live streams, in my videos, in interviews I've done on podcasts, on all over the place. In fact, actually, in an actual criminal court case. So I'm even on record stating that before I transitioned gender, about 3 years ago, not quite 3 years ago, before I transitioned gender, I was an old and crabby man hoping to die. Hoping to die. Not waiting to die. Not, okay, I'm going to live out my years. Hoping to die. Because life sucked that much. Now, 3 years later, I am happy and I am vibrant and I am welcoming life. I can't wait to see what the rest of my life brings. And I can't wait until, in the next 4 years or so, all of this, claptrap goes away. There you go. There is no doubt that gender-affirming care works. I personally have interviewed on the order of about 100, probably more than 100 at this point, transgender men and women. I've spoken to them personally. I have not met one. This is not, of course, clinical research, but I have spoken to more than 100 transgender men and women, none of whom says that they regret what they've done. All of the surveys that I have seen, I want to, qualify with that. All of the surveys I've seen show on the order of a 1% regret rate. I have seen more expansive surveys that go up to about 4 to 6%. But the bulk of those 4 to 6% regretted it because they received social backlash on what they were doing. So yeah, if you do any honest research, you will find that gender-affirming care works. And, at the risk of sounding like Cartman, I'm living proof. I wanted to end with that. I thought that sounded good. All right. Annette says, that is what is so poignant. You held on and now you are really living. My voice is so important. Thank you, Annette. I truly appreciate that. I am holding on. And I'm looking at a government that wants to limit people from growing into who they are. They want to limit people from becoming who they are. And I'm going to tell you, if you claim that what you're trying to do, and in particular the Trump administration, the religious right that supports him, if what you claim you're trying to do is help children, I don't remember the exact numbers. I believe it was 8-fold the suicide rate pre-Trump, and now I believe it was 8-fold, 800% increase in calls to suicide prevention hotlines. Actual acts of suicide. If you care about children, did you succeed here? Because I'm going to say no. No, if there are more children who are unhappy enough to leave the planet because of your actions, you need to consider what you've done. Don't blame me. Don't blame me, Digital Keith, though he's left. Don't blame me for what I'm doing here. These children are going to feel what they feel no matter what you want them to feel, because this is the way humanity works. This is the human experience. You have no control of over the human experience. I mean, Jasmine Vine and I did a live stream last Monday all about this. We're going to continue the conversation tomorrow all about this. How parents who go, well, I'm just doing it for the benefit of my kids. Well, when your kid's not there anymore, let's have a chat. And let me know if you think you did a good thing. All right. Miss Chief says, the regret rate tends to be younger transitioning people. I don't know all the facts around that. There's no doubt that the people I've spoken to, I have purposely tried not to talk to minors. Actually, there's a friend of mine who just reached out and was like, hey, I mean, it was somebody, gosh, I don't even remember how I met her, but somebody just reached out and said, oh, I'd like to talk to you about, my daughter who is a minor. And I'm already going, I don't know if I want to talk about it. So Miss Chief, I'm going to defer to that. Let's say that's true, that the detransitions and the regret come from people who transition younger at least than 52 when I did. All right, Bo then says, the problem with that attitude is you cannot torque people's bolts if you're gone. And Bo, I think we're talking about the children who have left us now. My own story, and it's true. And sometimes it's easier just to go, you know what, I don't want to torque people's bolts. I mean, prior to Trump being elected, I wrote stories about philosophy. I wrote about, human identity. I wrote about biographies. I wrote about happy things. Now that Trump has been elected, what I do is I write about shitty things. I explain the Constitution. I explain the First Amendment. I explain how science works. I explain things that I might have gotten to, but at the end of the day, like, I'm doing this because now there are people who want to leave the planet because of this. This is what happens now. Now I get emails from people who are like, listen, how do I make sure that I make it through 4 years? I never wanted to be that person, and I'm willing to bet the parents of children who are now gone never wanted to be those people either. So there you go. So Seculoid says, I was one of those kids, and I pushed it down every time it came back. One of those kids, I assume, one of the younger transitioning kids. And Seculoid says, now I'm actually happy. It made me miserable. Seculoid, that was I spent 52 years. It took me, I knew I was going to transition gender at the age of 12, 1982, I think it was, 81 to 83, somewhere in that area. I spent 40 years pushing it down, 40 years. I had no relationship with my son. I had a weak relationship with my wife. And you know what? Now I am happy. Now my son and I have a great relationship, making jokes. We were making jokes at breakfast. Now my wife and I have the ability to communicate at a deep level, a level we never had the possibility of doing before. If what you care about is people being happy, you are going to support what's going to make them happy. You're not going to go, you know what? You don't deserve this. You just get to die. That sucks. Miss Chief now says Jasmine was right, though, when she says transition has to take time and not be rushed. Agreed. I didn't say that it should be rushed. I didn't say that we should have people transitioning at 14 years old. Jasmine, I might point out, started transition 15 or 16 years old. I love Jasmine. She's my sister. Saying things about, rushing transition. When you go on black market HRT at 15, I don't know what to tell you. But if you're listening, Jasmine, still love you, sister. I don't say that. And in fact, the WPATH guidelines, of course, WPATH recommendations, recommend, no actual transition prior to 18 years old, or at least the age of consent, in the country where you are. I stand by that. I don't think you necessarily should transition at 12. like I knew I was going to. All right, Brenda says if they wanted to help, they meaning parents and the people who are saying they care for our children, they would concentrate on improving acceptance. I think that's an excellent point, Brenda. Studies show that suicidal ideation drops by something like 90% with positive support from family and friends. Truth, that support is gender-affirming care. Right? If you just go, listen, I want you to use she, her pronouns, and somebody goes, that's fine with me, I will start using she, her pronouns, suicidal ideation drops pretty quickly. 90%. I don't know the exact figures on that, but it is significant. Most of the reason people have regretted or detransitioned have been because they faced social backlash. Their friends and their family who said, I don't want you to do this. And those people finally said, okay, I won't. I will put you above me, and I'll stop what I'm doing that's going to make me happy. I'm going to go be miserable for your sake. Ooh, could you imagine having somebody tell you that? All right, going back, Big G over here on TikTok says bye. All right, bye. I mean, I see you're still in here, so I don't know if you're trying to say bye to my ilk. I wish you'd been here 51 minutes ago when I was going through the conversation that I did. Seculoid says her wife and her relationship with her wife has only improved. Fabulous. So fabulous. Seculoid also brings up it takes years to get meds to transition. Nobody rushes it. Good point. If you are on insurance, you're probably going to have difficulty getting the medications to transition. I mean, I ended up able to pay for everything on my own. I added all this up. I think it's closer to about $50,000 that I spent of my own money over the past not quite 3 years because my insurance really did shit for me. So, what did happen, however, was like a couple of weeks ago, my insurance covered $20 on a bottle of estrogen. I was like, ooh, thank you, that $20. So now it's only $49,980 that I spent because my insurance would not cover anything. So yes, it's difficult to get the meds. It's certainly difficult to pass through all the gateways to get any surgical treatment, any gender-affirming surgery. So Big G, here you go. Big G says the transition face backlash from the ones who supported them like you. Yeah, okay, probably true. $50,000 to still be a man. All right. If what you're calling as a man is somebody with XY chromosomes, you're wrong. I do happen to have an educational background in biology, and if you wanted me to talk a little bit about that, we could. But Big G says should have spent the money on a psychiatrist. What you're doing here, Big G, what you're doing is exactly what Brenda N just said. What we need to do is improve acceptance, because what you're doing is trying to make me feel bad about myself. In fact, so badly about myself that I either stop trying to want to be happy for my own sake, instead try to be happy for yours, or just let it go. Leave the planet. Does that make you feel better, Big G? Would that make you feel better if everybody like I am just left the planet because we decided it's more important for Big G to be happy than any single one of us? No. What you should do, Big G, is spend a little bit of time on a website that isn't like, The Blaze. Listen to people like I am who tell you about the actual experience. I'm the authority here, Big G. I'm the one who likely has more education than you do, more philosophy background than you do, more history background than you do. I'm the one who has 55 years of lived experience. I'm the authority, not Donald Trump. He knows nothing about me. Okay, I'm done with Big G because I want to say, hi, Brenna. My friend Brenna showed up. Hi. Oh, and also sent me I don't know what that gift is. Oh, it says goat. I hope that means greatest of all time and not, goat. All right, let's see. So Dot here says Big G, just because you can't understand something doesn't mean it's wrong. Just ignorant. Okay. I mean, that's cool. All right. Angie also sent more gifts. Thank you so much. Oh, Big G says appeal to authority, logical velocity, not surprise. What should I be appealing to? Should I be going, hey, I got a fucking Bible over there and that tells me you're wrong? What should I appeal to? What would appeal to you, Big G? Oh my gosh. Not surprised. Not surprised that I would tell you, listen, I happen to know how my life goes. Not surprised. You shouldn't be, because guess what? You have no authority on how my life goes. And that's because you did not live my life. I don't know what you think would be more authoritative. If what's more authoritative is somebody who's willing to write an executive order that is scientifically nonsensical, maybe that's why you voted for the person in power whom I have to mitigate on a daily basis. Oof. Griping me there, Big G. All right. Saoirse says, when does a precaution become a gateway? It's subjective. It's a great point. I'm calling them gateways because for the most part, the WPATH guidelines with gender-affirming surgery do recommend you get, I don't want to use the word investigated, but you do talk to at least two mental health professionals, psychiatrists or psychologists. In fact, psychologists are considered more important because those are people who actually study the mind, not just medicine. And I'm not dumping on psychiatrists. If you're out there and you're a psychiatrist, go you. But yeah, so that is a gateway. It's a recommendation, but it is a gateway. They also generally recommend, a certain number of years on hormone therapy, right? So, I mean, these are gateways. It is subjective, and I think the WPATH guidelines, the WPATH gateways, I'll even call them, are subjectively pretty difficult. I mean, it takes a long time to do this, unless you can afford it. And I actually was going to talk about that $50,000 just because I could afford it. It still took me years to do this, right? I mean, it was almost 2 years on the nose. It was just over 2 years between the time I put on my first estrogen patch and got gender-affirming surgery. Still almost 2 years because it just takes that long. What was I going to say about that? Oh, and that was pretty fast, but it did cost me money. And there's no doubt that with enough money, you will find doctors who will give people hormone therapy at 10, whatever, gender affirming surgeries at 14, whatever. I don't disagree. Those are not the people likely covered by insurance. So there you go. Let me see. Margie says Big G is a big D. I think that means gender dysphoria. Big gay. I don't think it's big gay, Miss Chief. All right. I'm looking at 2:58 here. I've been streaming for a little more than an hour. I also have been fighting a migraine headache for about 2 weeks here. So, getting ready to shut this down. I do want to acknowledge everybody that I've heard out here, even the people who disagreed. I do appreciate those. Poppy, Angie, thank you so much. Pony Boy with Nothing Gold Can Stay. People who made fun of me. Mark, thank you so much. Who else do we have here? Amy is 250. Emmy's 254. We're the same person, I think. I don't know. Anyway, Digital Keith, thank you. Big G, even thanks to you, Lady Ivanberg. Mick Poomoji, maybe I'm not going to thank you. Seculoid, thank you for sharing your story. Definitely appreciate it. On YouTube, I've got Grief Foundation. Thanks so much. Miss Chief, Ned7000, Bobby, Saoirse, Brenda, Louise, Bo, Anita, and Annette. I think I got everybody. If I missed you, forgive me. Thank you so much. I do what I do because you're out there listening. So thank you again. Bye. As Miss Chief says, bye, kitty cats. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, oh, hang on. Here's something from Margie. Says, I am beautiful and valid. Thank you for being here despite your migraine. Oh, sure. I mean, I do what I do because I love to do this. So thanks to everybody and talk soon. Bye.